Excuse me. Hello again, YouTube land. It's been well over a week since I last posted, and there's a reason. I've started off 2013 with a bang, making significant changes to lifestyle and diet, as many people do around the new year. So far, it seems to be paying off. But I also started it, with a whimper, which is referential to me rubbing my eyes and coughing a lot, with a pretty virulent case of sinusitis. Fun. But my symptoms seem to be abating, thanks to a long course of antibiotics and staying really far away from dairy. So, I was pretty disgusting last week. Oh, but what a time frame it's been. Let's see. Over the weekend, not much was going on. I spent the week trying to recover. Part of Friday, Sam was home sick, not with sinusitis. Then he went in for half a day, and then the weekend was basically us at home relaxing, trying to feel better and get some stuff done around here. And between Sunday and Monday, alright, you know what, let me back up. On Friday, I'd gone into the city to use a gift card that a relative sent as a late Hanukkah present, which I've been meaning to write her a thank you note for. And I was at the Q60 bus stop in the city. Now, the bus stop in the city is on 60th Street and 2nd Avenue. It's right at the bottom of the Queensboro Bridge, because that's the first stop on that line. I was there at about 2 o'clock, and I took that particular bus because I needed to go out to the mall. And from where I was, that was the best choice. Well, I went out to the mall, got what I was after, which was a Lodge 5-quart Dutch oven. One of the better purchases I've ever made for my kitchen, I gotta tell you. And that night, Friday night, we were watching the news, and it turns out a lady of significant size, which I subsequently found out is around 400 pounds, had fallen through the sidewalk at that bus stop. About 5 hours after I'd been there. So, the weekend was off to an interesting beginning, to say the least. Sorry, my hair's still damp. I had to tie it back to go outside and pick up some ginger ale for myself and my stomach. Ugh. What else? Over the weekend, as I said, we were relaxing, trying to feel better, recuperate clean. On Sunday, I decided to try out a recipe in the Dutch oven for sourdough bread, which I found or discovered, however you want to phrase it, watching the episode Going Dutch of Good Eats. Not surprisingly, I get a lot of food ideas and recipes from that show. So I made the sourdough bread. Now the thing about the sourdough bread is that it has to proof initially for 19 hours. Yes, 19 hours. Has to do with a lot of culinary mechanics and gluten development, but suffice to say, Monday, Sam was home sick. So he was relaxing, and I was trying to help him feel better. You know, just quiet stuff around the house. But one of the things I was working on was this bread dough. And I baked it off, and it is remarkable. I mean, remarkable. It is one of the very, very few recipes that the first time I ever tried to do it, it came out perfect. Perfect. Golden brown, crispy, the right kind of chewy. It's not the same kind of starter that most sourdoughs are made with, so it's not as sour as tradition. But I don't care. This is easily, like, in the top 3 of the best breads I've ever eaten. And I'm so proud that I made it. So, coasting from that culinary high, yesterday being Tuesday, I decided to try another new recipe. Even though it was Sam's night to cook for himself, I decided, well, I want to make it, and if I like it, he'll probably have some, and blah, blah, blah. I decided to make broccoli cheddar soup, which is very interesting for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not really supposed to have dairy. Two, I've never been a big fan of broccoli. And three, making soup, while typically simple, can be very complicated if there are ingredients involved that either you really don't like, really don't want to use, or are genuinely allergic to. Now in this case, it involved chicken stock, or broth, depending on which recipe you looked at. And I didn't want to use that product. I'd rather use vegetable stock or broth. Well, I think broth with vegetables, it can only be vegetable broth, technically speaking. Stock involves collagen. So I had to go looking around for it. Well, a couple people on Facebook were nice enough to give me a couple of links as suggestions. And I looked through them, and I did like one of them, but I tweaked it. Because it's me, and if I'm going to do it, I want to make it my own, and blah, 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 you know, culinary chatter. So I took one large-ish size yellow onion, which are really not that big to begin with. They're, I mean, honestly, only about that big. Fine sliced it on a mandolin, sauteed it in the 1 stick of butter the recipe called for, unsalted butter. Added a 16-ounce bag of frozen broccoli, covered it with a quart of vegetable broth, simmered it off for about 20 minutes, made sure the broccoli was good and mush. Sliced on the mandolin 3 cloves of peeled fresh garlic, because I didn't have garlic powder, and quite frankly, I'd rather use fresh garlic whenever I have the chance, and since I always keep a lot of it in the house. To that, I added about 8 ounces of shredded Colby Jack cheese, then about 8 ounces of shredded mild cheddar, and then to that you're supposed to add excuse me, a certain amount of milk or cream, depending on what recipe you're looking at. Well, I had some in the house, so for the 2 cups it called for, I used 1 cup of heavy cream and 1 cup of skim milk, because it kind of, you know, extreme one, extreme the other, kind of mitigate. And besides, I didn't want to use any of my half and half. That's for my coffee. So added all that in. Then I went and I followed the rest of the recipe, which calls for a cup of water and 11 tablespoons of cornstarch, which, if you don't know, when you mix together and add to something like a cheese cream soup, as well as other things, cornstarch is a thickening agent. So that's part of what gives it that unctuous mouthfeel. And took a stick blender to it because I like creamy soups. The only time I like chunks in a cream soup is when I'm having classic New England clam chowder. And that's got more to do with that's how I grew up eating it, so that's how I prefer it. And heated that for a little while, get it all together, and it was really good. I mean, surprisingly enough, 1 bowl, and I mean like a dinner size bowl, was enough for a meal. And not even just for me, for my husband, who eats everything. He has an appetite that doesn't stop. So I was really proud of that too. And of course, being that it was a cheesy soup, I served it with some of the sourdough, which is now mostly gone, and I'm probably going to spend time in the next couple of days making more, because it was really good. What else? Today is beer day. A couple weeks ago, I broke out the Mr. Beer starter kit that Dad got me for Christmas, which was a suggestion I'd made to him, because when I was a kid, he did home brewing. I remember going with him to the classes at USM in Portland. I think it was in Portland. And maybe it was Gorham. Whatever. And I remember it being not incredibly time-consuming, meaning like you don't have to stand there and do something for a long time. But I remember it being fun, and I remember it being something that Dad and I did together. which admittedly, when you're a 9-year-old and you're doing something with your dad, like making beer, it gets a little quasi-pseudo white trash-esque, depending on who you are. But I don't really care. I mean, because what I remember is I was doing something fun with my dad. So I decided to start getting back into that a little bit. And today is the day where I'm supposed to test it to see if it tastes basically like flat beer, if it tastes like beer. Because the carbonation is a whole separate process that you have to do by letting it sit in the bottles and blah, blah, blah. So today is Test the Beer Day. So culinarily, there's a lot going on in my house the last few days. And I'm actually really kind of proud of that because cooking at home is definitely more healthy, depending on what you make. And it's certainly less expensive than eating out because at least half the price of what you're paying when you eat food out is what it takes to get the food to you. So if it's fast food, you're paying for the processing, the shipping, the person at the register serving it to you, the bag that it comes in. And even if you're at a local, diner type place, you're still in part paying for the eggs, the bread, the milk, the cheese, the coffee, the creamer, the sugar, the salt, the pepper, the waitress. It's a lot involved. It's why it costs as much as it does. So I think it's a lot healthier and a lot more economical. And in my case, it makes a lot more sense because I really do like to cook. I always have. I never had sufficient equipment, proper equipment, adequate culinary training. I mean, my dad likes to cook. He's German-Italian. My mom never liked to cook except for red sauce, which to Italians is also referred to as gravy. But I'll give her this. Her marinara was actually really good. I don't know where she got the recipe from, but it was legitimate marinara. In our house, we had one of them gigunda Italian, I think of as Italian-sized stock pots that, had to have been like 12, quarts or something. And she would make the whole thing. Well, not the whole thing. I mean, you gotta have room for boilage and stuff. But the whole thing that she could was marinara, and she'd give it to everybody, and it took 2-3 days simmering on low on the stovetop. It was so good. But aside from that, I've been culinarily on my own. I have to teach myself. I have to learn how to read recipes. I have what some would call an unhealthy obsession with Food Network, and now the Cooking Channel to some extent. But a lot of my fundamentals, I've said it before, I'll say it again, comes from the show Good Eats. I've always really appreciated Alton Brown's approach to the science behind the delicious result. I am that type of learner. So, that's why I have all 3 of the Good Eats cookbooks now. Other than that, there's been some stupidity going on in and around my family, which is a whole other thing, but I'll simplify it like this, okay? If you want to talk to me, talk to me. Even if you're going to do it via social media and not person to person, that's fine. But do us all a huge favor and just completely avoid the shitstorm that will ensue by going through somebody else. Okay? And I'm not just referring to one person, actually. More than one person, unfortunately, has tried this tactic. Don't go through my dad. Don't go through my siblings. And please do not try and go through my husband as if somehow you're going to win one of these people over to your side in the battle against me. Because you know what? Even if it's a legitimate battle, even if there's legitimate reason for it to be you versus me, trying to win people over just makes you shady and greasy and disgusting as a human being. Because no one you want to deal with, in my opinion, will be brought over by subversive, manipulative tactics and winning them to your side. If your cause is their cause and they agree with you, you don't need to convert them. You don't need to use them as a back door. They'll agree with you up front. Now, I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to leave it at that, okay? And the next post will not be as long because hopefully it will not take me as long to get around to posting it, therefore resulting in a huge amount of information to shove into one post.